welcome back. With so many people in mortgage arrears and negative equity, you can understand the upsurge in rental demand.
But now one young man is trying to see if it's possible to avoid the mortgage nightmare by developing a live-in property for less than €30,000. He's hoping people will send him images of unused sites that are ripe for development, and some are stranger than others.
The patio doors are here, the decking is being made full use of, at a time when the property market is still on its knees and getting a mortgage isn't an attractive prospect. Perhaps to find that des res that your heart desires, would you consider living in a shipping container? It may look like a steel box from the outside, but the interior of the container is not unlike that of a well-finished apartment. Who would live in a place like this?
Someone like me, someone that doesn't want to be saddled with an endless debt burden of a mortgage, someone that can't afford a normal house. But I mean, I'm part of a generation that's going to live at home for longer than any previous generation. Poor job prospects, inherit less able to afford a deposit on the house, even if you could get one. So I think that, you know, as I said, something needs to change in the housing sector if we want people like this to actually put down roots in this country. Something like a container is actually quite accessible because there's an oversupply of them. They're incredibly robust, they're incredibly sturdy, they make a great structure of a house, and they're very cheap, they're very affordable. You know, you can get a container like this in 20 feet or 40 feet and kind of put a house together like Lego.
There's some help from an interior designer on this one.
Yeah, I mean, this just goes to show what can be done with enough kind of creativity and thought that it doesn't actually ever have to feel like a shipping container at any point. You know, the back walls open up, you can hang a hammock out of it on a nice day, when you open up the windows and everything else, and the space doesn't really even become an issue because you feel like you're part of the outside. And this is just one example of what can be done with a kind of a small budget. You know, we've seen houses be put on roofs in New York and built end of laneways in Norway and in between buildings in Berlin and even in underground public facilities and abandoned public facilities in London. So this is kind of just one example of what can be done with a very small space.
People will instantly look and think, it's a container. How do you use it? We're in it now. We don't actually need these jackets. It's very, very warm in here.
It certainly is. I mean, there's actually big kind of environmental benefits that come from seeing how small you can live rather than how large, in that it's very easy to heat. I mean, there's a very small kind of wood stove there, and the place is heated in a matter of moments. It takes very little to keep it going. So there's also kind of a small environmental footprint, but there's also even smaller bills. I mean, there's a full shower, there's a bathroom, there's stove for cooking, there's an oven, there's everything you need. It is fully habitable. It's a small space, not an uncomfortable space.
I have to ask you about the throne. How does that work?
Well, in here, it's a chemical toilet. But depending on the site, that could be one of a number of options. It could just be a normal plunge toilet. It could be a compost toilet. There's no reason that it wouldn't necessarily just take a traditional toilet, and toilets can be all shapes and sizes. So it mightn't be the biggest throne in the world, but it'll work functioning the same way.
Why did you decide to help Cathal with this?
Well, when Cathal first contacted us to say he was trying to find a rooftop building where he could put a shipping container to live, my first thought, of course, was that he was crazy. But I actually feel that sometimes when I meet first-time buyers who are going to get a €500,000 mortgage, that they genuinely it's not sustainable. And sometimes I think that maybe that's more crazy. So we decided to work with Cathal, see what we could do. And in fact, what we found out very simply was that his motivations for doing this were completely in the right place. He wants to avoid debt. He wants to stay in the city that he loves. And the hallmark of any functioning market is that the people who contribute to that city, they can afford to live in it. And if they can afford to live in it, they contribute to it. It doesn't make sense that the moment they decide to get married and start a family, that we ship them out to the suburbs, because then suddenly they're removed from this community that they've started to build up.
This is all part of a competition that's running at the moment. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so obviously building a house for what would traditionally be the deposit on a normal house is one thing, but a lot of the issue that arises comes from where to put it. You know, this needs to be somewhere. So not being able to afford a traditional site, and certainly not being able to afford one in Dublin, we knew that we'd need to look at kind of more obscure sites, sites that would have little to no commercial value. And we look at what's been done elsewhere, you start to realize that any space can be habitable. You know, where in spaces at a premium, some very kind of creative things happen. So that's what this competition is all about. It's so that to encourage people as they're walking around to view these spaces as a potential dwelling, and to take a quick photo and email the details to info@buyersbroker.ie, and even begin with a chance to win an iPad Mini to reward them for taking the time to do so.
Incredibly clever idea, because this is happening all over the world. People are taking railroad carriages, and turning them into living accommodation.
And how much is that for sale? That you
I'm not sure the price on that one, because of course an interior designer was brought in to put that together.
Yeah.
But you're all around 30-40 grand total.
And you move it then to where you want.
And now you're going to need a low loader and a crane to do that.
Okay.
But at the same time, that is it. And you can put those things on a rooftop. You can put them in between two buildings. And the competition that Cahill's talking about, already he was saying that they found a site down near, I think it's kind of a train station, which is kind of like underneath the arches.
Yeah.
An unused site. You've got derelict sites. Somebody found an old handball out somewhere in the docklands in Dublin, not being used. You could put about 4 or 5 those in there. So you're rent free. I don't know if Phil Hogan will thank him too much, because I know if there's much property tax that you can attach to something like that, or it would be worth collecting. But it's certainly interesting, and we wish him well with it. It really is.
Good, great idea.